There's another aspect of this, that the voice issue is opening up a divide between the Liberal Party and corporate Australia, because on the whole, corporate Australia does seem to be supporting the voice, and obviously the Liberals under Dutton are opposing the referendum.
Well, Sharri, I think a lot of us in the coalition, including myself, and I say this as someone who was a company secretary of a listed public company, so I have a background and experience dealing with retail shareholders, and we are just quite baffled as to why corporate Australia has bought in so heavily onto one side of this debate. And one of the risks for corporate Australia is when you do this, then when you come to Parliament and make submissions with respect to your core business, it diminishes your accountability, it diminishes your persuasiveness when you've bought into these extraneous social issues. And that's the danger for corporate Australia.
I also interviewed John Howard last week, former Prime Minister John Howard, and he made the point that Australians don't like to be bullied. And he said that when you've got sporting codes and companies, and he actually said the example of Qantas painting yes on the side of some of its planes, he described it as egregious. So he made the point that Australians don't like to be told how to think. Do you think that there is an element of this, that actually all of this campaigning could backfire because Australians would feel pressured into how to vote and how to think?
Sharri, I couldn't agree more. And it doesn't matter whether it's a large corporation, a sporting code, non-government organisation, a school or university, and some of the stories I've heard coming out of our schools and universities as to how they're dictating to students as to how students of voting age should vote, it is being very counterproductive. And it's actually playing into the no camp's hands because, as you say, Australians have a wonderful anti-authoritarian streak and they do not like being told by large organisations, celebrities, sporting bodies, how they should or should not vote.
So you're a leader of the Liberals for No campaign. Do you think there is also an obligation on the coalition to outline how it will try and end or improve Indigenous disadvantage? Because at this point, it does look like the referendum's going to fail.
Oh, absolutely, Sharri. And look, I think there's an obligation upon everyone involved in politics across the broader civic society. If the referendum does go down, and it's certainly looking that way, then there's an obligation on all of us to come together and track out the pathway forward. And from my perspective, one of the key things to do, and Senator Nampijinpa Price has been very clear with respect to this, is to look at what funds are going to address these issues in especially remote and regional Aboriginal communities, and making sure we're getting bang for our buck and focusing on making changes at the grassroots level, and make sure every dollar of government money is being spent wisely and is making a difference at the coalface. From my perspective, that should be the focus.
Look, we spoke earlier on in the show about how new figures out today, and the New South Wales Department of Planning confirmed these figures. 38,000 land claims, Aboriginal land claims that have not yet been settled. And this is just in the state of New South Wales alone. We don't have the figures for the rest of the country. Do you think revelations around this are also going to impact the referendum?
Oh, absolutely. I think it all plays in to the same vibe, just as the Western Australian cultural heritage legislation, which was a disaster, played into the vibe, just as the comments which were made in Victoria around the justice system. Also, I think all of these things lead to people asking themselves, especially those in the undecided camp or in the soft yes camp, what does this all mean for Australia? And I think that's the question they're asking. And as soon as they ask that question and they find there's no detail, or they go into the background around the dialogues and the calls for the treaty, reparations, percentage of GDP, that is when people are moving from the soft yes camp into the no camp, or hardening in the no camp.